Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today I have a discussion for you. Also, Happy New Year's, guys. We're almost there. It's New Year's Eve when you're going to be seeing this, and effectively, this is going to be the last video for the year. So I just want to appreciate you all for being a part of the Ed Army, whether you've been here from the beginning, whether you have been just recent. I actually want to tell you I appreciate you, and of always, if you are new to this channel or new to these videos, or you just haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and give that button a tap there. It really does help me out. One little step for you is a big step for me, and I appreciate it nonetheless. But as you can tell by the thumbnail of this video, we're focusing on the War Greymons today, and if either of these are better than each other, or are they just kind of separate equals, or is there actually something that makes one better than the other? So, as always, let's get into it today. So, effectively, the reason I'm doing this video is I actually have been building this deck because, as you guys know, as I came into the card game, I decided I'm only really going to build like one deck. When I got out of it last time, I was playing a bunch of decks, and I might still like look into them, but playing them wise due to time and also constraints of money too, I've decided I'm not going to do that. It's just kind of the thing. But it doesn't mean that I don't like any other deck more or less. There's a lot of times where I'm like, ooh, I want to buy cards for a certain deck, and I don't. But my reasoning for this was hyper focusing on what's the best version of the Greymon deck, and or is there actually a better version, and or what are the best cards. So as I was developing my top end, these two cards kept on clashing, and they kept on clashing for good reason. I can explain why with both, but let's get started with both. So starting off with, obviously I'm going to go with Raid War Greymon because it's been around longer. It is probably, I would argue, the most used War Greymon at the current time, due to the fact that it has, obviously, Raid is a keyword. It can unsuspend when attack targets are switched. It has Reboot when it digivolves, and effectively, it's a red and black, so effectively, it can digivolve on top of either the black level 5s and or Metal Greymons, or Digimon with Metal Greymon in their name. So effectively, it lets you kind of float between which cards you want to be, or which decks you want to be a part of, which strategy you want to. I think this is the card that really allows. I think people are playing like Toolbox Greymon at the top end, where they play maybe Black War Greymon X. They play this. They could play Guilemon. They could play a lot of different top end pieces to kind of go together, and probably playing these a multitude of pieces for the best strategy. And then on the left, we have basically the new kid in town. We have War Greymon from BT14, the secret rare. And arguably, this card is definitely undervalued at the moment. Being under $10 for this card is absolutely fantastic. And let me give my reasons why. Even inherently for its stats, it's already just pretty solid for Omega. And yes, it's a cost to Digivolve on top of level 5 with Greymon and name, as a special evolution cost. Is still 4 to Digivolve, but for how much you get in this card, it's absolutely worth the investment. So effectively, it has a pseudo blitz effect where when you Digivolve into it, it'll gain raid, and then it may attack, meaning as long as it gains the ability, it's able to attack that turn. So effectively giving like a pseudo blitz. Then it also has this one attacking effect that if you have a tamer, this Digimon gets security attack +1 and piercing for the turn. And also the warping ability to Digivolve on top of a Agumon if your opponent has a Digimon with 10,000 DP in name and you have tie out. Really, really good. So basically for this video, why are either of these better than the other, or is there specific applications for both? Now, my reason for picking both in my deck was solely based on the fact that I liked Raid War Greymon still, because I think when you're building into the OTK and you need a blocker, it serves a purpose better, because on that turn you Digivolve, if you are suspended, you can reboot, which means you probably swung with Metal Greymon or Metal Greymon X to do damage, and you still get a blocker set up that's really, really big and can unsuspend itself. With War Greymon on the left, what you have here is basically your burst damage effectively. So when you go into it with like your Agumon, if you warp or you have your stack built and you go into this one, as long as you have the tamer out, is at least doing 2 checks bare minimum. And if you've used Metal Greymon X's effect, as well as the Greymon with security attack +1 as it's inheritable, you're doing at least 4 checks. And your opponent, in theory, would be like, oh, okay, well, I'll get rid of it on the turn because they'll Digivolve into it, they'll pass the turn. Because of its effect, it can attack. So it basically gives it blitz, allowing it to do the burst damage immediately. So it basically puts your opponent on the back foot. Also, it being able to warp really does help out in that when your opponent is dealing with your stack, because in Greymon decks, one of their biggest issues is if you deal with their stack immediately and they don't have anything in the back, they're basically down for a turn. This allows the deck to, if there's a spare Agumon, immediately climb back into the game by forcing into the War Greymon, and the War Greymon can do a lot of damage. There have been instances where I've come back from losing by going into War Greymon and then swinging with it and then going into Blitz Omni, and it basically took out the rest of the security and finished the game by itself. So that's the advantage there. However, Raid War Greymon's tempoing ability, I think, is what keeps it in the running against this new War Greymon from Blast Ace. So both have their niches. I do think that when it comes to looking at both downsides of either one, it's a little bit interesting because with something like the Raid War Greymon, its only real downside is that if you don't have a stack set up for it, it's how I put it, it's not as strong. Whereas something like the War Greymon from Blast Ace is that its inheritables don't necessarily matter because it can still do a lot of damage on its own. So it's almost a trade-off. That's why I play both, because sometimes you maybe need the tempo swing, and then sometimes maybe you need to do the damage to catch up. Like I said, Raid War Greymon's ability to keep the tempo in your favor is just too strong, because once it starts swinging twice, you can just immediately eliminate threats. And usually you have piercing because you'll get it off of Metal Greymon. And then something like War Greymon, its advantage is that it is able to continuously loop damage through just attacking itself. It's a problem as long as you have tamers. If you don't have tamers, then it can at least do the raid and take out a Digimon. But with the tamer, it becomes a big threat because now it's just doing piercing and security extra checks. And your opponent has to deal with it. That's honestly what makes it just as good. But basically, I wanted to end the year on a video that's just a little bit more for fun because I have stuff to do. And I want to make sure I got you guys some type of video, but also something I wanted to talk about because I really actually enjoyed this debate for me deciding these two, because I have 4 of Raid War Greymon that I had basically when it came out. And then I still need to pick up copies of War Greymon, and I just haven't decided on which one to pick up, or if it's worth picking them up. And I think it is because they're still cheap. So that's all I've got for you guys today, because I'm probably going to pick up 2 more of these babies because a playset of this is actually kind of worth it for a specific deck. But hey, we'll talk about it in the future. And as always, this is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to have a happy new year and sign on.